introductions, roll call. If Janice, if you could do a roll call.
Yes, ma'am. Town of Ashland, Miss Amos. Charles City County Vice Chair Adams.
Present.
Chesterfield County, Miss Smith.
Here.
Mr. Banuelos, I know we do have him in the webinar. Hanover County, Mr. Vadunez, I believe he's able to speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm not appearing on the screen though.
Yeah, we're having a problem with the webinar with just a couple members not being able to be promoted to panelist.
I got you.
Okay. Henrico County, Miss Smidler.
Here.
Mr. Yor. New Kent County, Miss Inman.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Powhatan County, Mr. Shardine. City of Richmond, Chair Clark.
Good morning. Present.
Good morning. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. DRPT, Mr. Dubinsky. Mr. Hudson. GRTC, Miss Robinson.
Present.
Mr. Robinson. Plan RBA, Mr. Bushing.
Here.
Mr. Ariel. Ride Finders, Mr. O'Keefe.
Here.
RMTA, Miss Simmons. VDOT, Miss Rhodes.
Here.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Janice. And then consideration of amendments to the meeting agenda. I'm not sure if we have any amendments that the committee would like to do.
Vice Chair Adams, no, we don't have any changes. This is Diana.
Thanks.
And I'm also having some problems hearing you. If everyone could mute their line, someone's line is live. That person right there, is that your office?
Thank you, Diana. I think I heard that there were no amendments to the meeting agenda. None. Okay. All right. So we'll move on to the approval of the October 10th TAC meeting minutes. If there's any corrections or comments. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved. This is Barb.
Thank you, Barb.
Sharon Smidler, second.
Thank you,
Sharon
Sharon.
Smidler, second.
Thank you, Sharon. So I guess we can just do a voice vote. All in favor of approving the October 10th TAC meeting minutes, say aye.
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 Anyone disapprove? So the minutes are approved. And then we'll go ahead and see if Dorona has any public comment or if anyone has any public comments. And then the transportation.
We haven't received any, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Miles. All right, no comments. And then do we have a TAC chairman's report? I have nothing to report. I don't know if Dorona has anything to report for the committee.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. And then moving on to item 7, we'll have a discussion with GRTC about the fiscal year 26 regional public transportation plan introduction. If you'd like to fill us in.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I appreciate it. So, my name is Patricia Robinson, Assistant Director of Planning and Scheduling, GRTC. I just wanted to bring to the group's attention the Regional Public Transportation Plan for FY 26. This is kind of our kickoff meeting. So I just wanted to go over a quick project introduction, what the priorities are as a high level, currently, and then kind of what our next steps are as far as meeting schedules and what's going to be expected out of this group or appreciated from this group. So this project came out of 2020 with the creation of CBTA, of course, having the dedicated funding to GRTC. This is an annual requirement to update our upcoming fiscal year's service priorities and capital priorities. So this is going to address the following to ensure stability and maintenance of transit operations. We prioritize capital requirements to maintain assets in a state of good repair, to advance planning studies for operational and capital mobility, and to continue to implement expansion priorities. So that's going to include our fixed route, our BRTs, I should say, as we're moving forward with 2 lines, our microtransit zones, capital projects, and it's going to be identifying projects and coming up with an estimated cost for these. So we're pulling from a few different resources. We have our long-range transportation plan from Connect 2045, Richmond Connects. Dan Motto at Plan RVA was able to share with us a draft of the rural transportation analysis. The existing conditions report is a section that's complete that we can work off of. And then our guiding document is GRTC's Transit Strategic Plan, the TSP. And then just as a real quick highlight of what the TSP had outlined for fiscal year 2026 is the Broad Rock Cherry Gardens microtransit zone to replace our current routes 86 and 88. The Montrose White Oak Village zone microtransit zone to replace the current Route 56. And by replace, I just want to emphasize that it's a much larger coverage area than just our fixed route by itself, with better service than kind of our limited fixed route frequency that's available today. In the TSP, we have outlined to extend the 3B to Colbrook Road and the 82 Express to the Technical Center and Park and Ride. For Route 5 to absorb the 77, so we do a short trip where it currently ends and then do a long trip to cover the rest of the 77 and increase frequency. And they're also cited for headway or span improvements on routes 12, 19, 50, 78, 87, and the Pulse. So the TSP outreach efforts, the reason I'm kind of calling it our guiding document for this effort is because a lot of public outreach went into that new plan that we're going to be working off of. So we did an origin and destination survey, pop-up events at transfer hubs, 2 rounds of priority surveys for riders, stakeholders, GRTC staff, as far as admin, executive, and operators, and our jurisdictional partners, kind of all went into that effort. So our next steps is that GRC is going to be working internally to review the resources that I listed and review our TSP, come up with a working list of priorities. And then for the December TPO TAC meeting, in lieu of a working group, we're just going to set aside a few minutes in that meeting to re-solidify the priorities with the jurisdictions. So we'd be asking you to make sure you come with any recommendations or changes to plans in that conversation. And then from now until February, GRC is going to be finalizing that list, refining the financial calculations, and we would come back to TPO TAC in February to review that draft priority list and get kind of final approval. From there, we would then take that final list to GRC's board in March and CBTA TAC and full authority in April for the goal is the project completion by the end of May. So that's my high level. I just wanted to give you guys notice that we'd be hijacking a little bit of the December meeting and re-solidifying priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. Any questions just yet?
This is Diorana. I have one question. Thank you for this information. I think that it seems like it does have a good roll-up of some of the localities' local plans into the regional. So thank you for that. I did think I heard you say something about transfer hubs.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just wanted to make, just to bring on the radar that Greyhound has been very adamant about wanting to be involved in that growth. So I do ask for that consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Hey, Tricia. This is Barb. Do you know the status of the paratransit study?
We did an initial, I'm so sorry, we did a meeting with potential vendors, but it hasn't officially, the contract hasn't been awarded yet.
Oh, yeah, I think I did know that. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to provide a little context for everyone. We have a little bit of downtime on the TAC for the next couple of months. The next policy board action meeting isn't until February. So rather than setting back up the public transportation working group and as you see on the next item, the regional funding framework working group, rather than doing a whole bunch of extra working groups, we thought it'd be a little more effective and efficient with everyone's time to just do it here at the TAC meeting and try and advance those. So that's for context why we're having Trish present today and why GRTC is going to be using some of the December and February meetings.
And this is Dirana. And Miles, thank you for that. But do we want to double check to make sure, I guess, just logistically wise, it doesn't say, like, process wise, it doesn't say the public transportation working group, or at least while we're combining it, it still serves as that meeting as well. Just trying to make sure that with the working group and the technical group.
To my understanding, as far as the legislative requirement, it's just that the plan be coordinated with the TPO. So I think from however the TPO wants to do it, whether it's through a working group or through the full TAC and up to the policy board, at the end of the day, the goal is to get to the policy board, and that the policy board is also seeing these recommendations before they're going over to the CBTA.
Yes, I totally agree. But I'm just trying to make sure which role that those entities play, if any. And then if they need to be called up, I guess, for internal discussion, they're still there for consideration. I would say yes as the chair. Thank you.
All right, I think Frank has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Sherry. It's not a question, but just something to add to what Darren had stated early on regarding the interest from Greyhound and Flexbus. Darren, I will get with you so we can have further conversations about that. I know there have been a couple of emails, and I just need some clarification. So I will try to touch base with you on that.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or discussion? Okay, and if not, we'll go ahead and let Mr. Miles Bushin tell us about the regional funding framework review, item number 8 on the agenda.
So, good morning again, everyone. So as I mentioned, we are trying to use the TAC meeting as our place to go ahead and review some of these things that we would normally have put into a working group and then brought back to TAC. As you'll recall, last month we discussed the regional funding framework, and we discussed that there was no clear consensus on a path forward other than moving to every other year for the new project applications. The policy board took TAC's recommendation and has moved forward with that. But part of that process was also a commitment to continue reviewing the rest of the outstanding items that we had from our list and anything else that you guys may have to make sure that we have all the changes and revisions in place for this upcoming new funding cycle, which would be in the summer of next year. So what I wanted to do today was start off with just a orientation on the funding framework and how the funding programs work, and then get into the issues that we've identified and some of those survey results. And then from there, really the goal is just to make sure we've captured everything that we should be studying through this process, at least of what we know right now. And then over the next few months, while we have a little bit of downtime at the TAC level, we will be working through some of those issues, trying to come up with recommendations or policy changes as needed. So for today's purposes, we're just going through the first 3 items in this presentation, and then the possible solutions will sort of be the pieces that we'll be hitting on over and over again over the next few months. So starting it off with just the overarching legal and policy requirements that we have going into the funding program. So as you may already know, there are multiple levels of government sort of above the MPO that shape what we do and dictate how these programs work. So federal law establishes these funding programs. It sets the eligibilities for the different funding types. It sets how much money will be available, where these projects can be located, really provides the shape and the framework. It also creates obligation deadlines. So there's a set amount of time that we have from when the funding is available to obligate those dollars. State law then comes in under that and actually provides even more structure. So the state budget also sets timelines for obligating, which are even more strict. So as you all know, we have to obligate all of our funds within 12 months of the allocation. And there are consequences if we don't meet that. For RSTP, the consequence could be that we would lose our state match. On the CMAQ side, the funding could be reallocated to other CMAQ eligible programs around the state. So that is really the carrot and the stick there, and the incentive for us to do it. Finally, the CTB comes in, and the CTB has the policy and the structure of when we have to do our allocation. So essentially, they're on a timeline to adopt an allocations plan each year, which sets up our structure that we have to have everything finalized by the spring. So that's sort of the foundation of where we're working at, just so everybody starts on the same page. So what does our framework do? Our framework fills in the gaps. So basically, our framework lays out the process. How do we take in applications? How do we score the applications? How do we fund them? It lays out the limits in terms of the number of applications everybody can have. It defines the scoring. So how do we rank those projects and decide which projects should be advanced to funding? It sets up the priority for allocation. So some of you may recall this because we're going through it on the CVTA side, but there's a step-by-step process where we do existing projects first, and then we do the reserve first, then we do the existing projects, then we go to new projects, and we do them in order of the funding programs and sort of how restrictive they are. The framework also sets up our existing project priorities. So it establishes the thresholds of when it has to go to TAC, when it has to go to the TPO, and really establishes that we should be focusing on completing the projects we've already selected before selecting new. It also sets up our leveraging policy, which is much more narrow than the CVTA side that we've been working through. So leveraging on the TPO, we will fund the PE phase with leverage. So it's a small portion of the overall project, but that's reflective of the much smaller pot. And just for that context, overall across the whole program, all 3 or 4 of the funding programs, however you want to count it, with TAP, RSTP, CMAQ, and the carbon program, we have about $35 million a year. So that's the general budget that we're working with for those programs. So this brings us to the questions for review. So I just want to take a few minutes, run through these, and then open it up for discussion to make sure we're capturing everything. So the first thing, and we've seen this before, is the overall time commitment for the program. As I've mentioned, we have 34 new project applications that we receive on average each cycle, and we're only selecting 6 projects. So it's not a great conversion rate of projects or applications to actual funded projects. And the median award is only $1.9 million, which means that we're actually getting relatively small projects for the money as well. This one, and this is something that's going to be on every slide, this time commitment issue was a priority in 33% of the surveys that we received. So if you'll recall, back in August, we sent out a survey to the localities asking how the program's working. And in a third of those, we heard back that the time commitment was a serious challenge that we should be looking to address. The second item that we had heard from you guys, from the board members, was that existing project priority is a challenge. And I think we've all seen this over the past few years. We're on average awarding additional funding to 8 projects with a median additional award of $2 million each year. So over the past 3 cycles, from 2021 through this past wrap up in 2024, we've awarded $64.8 million in additional funding to projects that were already in our program. Now, obviously, this has been a time of a lot of inflation. There's drastic changes in the market, but this is significantly larger than what we've been able to award to new projects. So existing projects really are eating into a lot of the budget. And this was raised as a priority in 83% of the surveys. And it looks like we have a question on this one. I can stop here, Madam Chair, if that works.
Yes.
Yeah, Miles, I just wanted to mention, in addition to just general inflation, we've also had a commitment to fund those legacy projects. So it's a little skewed in that high number for those 2 reasons, and probably others.
Yes, absolutely. I think there are, and for those of you who weren't here a few years ago, we did an in-depth dive into all the reasons that all the projects that have seen a cost increase over the years have had their cost increases. So I think it's something that we've been on top of. I think the key here is that we are seeing that existing projects are using up more of the budget than the new projects. So I think that's the big takeaway. And we've heard from several members that that is a concern because they can't find solutions to getting the new projects and moving them forward.
And Madam Vice Chair, I just echo a little bit of what Barb is saying, in that if we keep showing or making a point of kind of this skewed data to make a point, I think that it's unfair, in that the majority of the projects, as we can see by the award amount of about $2 million a year, and the projects cost $50 million, that's just the money keep going to these larger projects. And I think that points to the priority of what the region has been able to accomplish with those dollars. But again, I think that showing it in the way of that really doesn't, I don't think, puts it in a good light, and we could present it slightly different. Thank you.
Any other comments before I move on with this one? And I appreciate the comment, and we'll look at other ways to present this. All right, so the third priority that we've heard for addressing is sort of the regional versus smaller local priority projects. So regional priorities, such as those that come out of our constrained long-range plan, are only 6 of our 34 applications, so about 18% a year are those regional scale projects. And that's only turning into about 10% of the new project investments that we're making. So the challenge here is, obviously we have these big projects, these large regional priorities. We do also have a small pot, as I mentioned. It's only about $35 million across all 4 of the programs. So figuring out how best to address those regional priorities and how best to use the TPO funding along with the other dollars that are out there, Smart Scale, CVTA, to address these regional projects is another piece of what we wanted to look at. And again, we heard this one from a third of the surveys that were submitted. The fourth item that we've heard is bike ped funding. In particular, there's really 2 sort of separate pieces or themes running through this. The first is that Smart Scale, with the changes to the high priority projects program, is no longer accepting regional applications for bike ped type projects. along with that, our major corridors, so projects along Broad or Midlothian Turnpike, are not scoring well as they should or as it would be desired. And so they're not floating up to the top in that ranking and scoring process, which then creates the challenge of how do we fund major regional trails, major regional bike ped initiatives like the Fall Line, where we do still have a large deficit. So the priority for this was in a third of the surveys, but this is one that we've heard from several of our local members as well. The fifth section was project readiness. So this is really two sides of this. The first is really how ready the project actually is. So some of the projects that we have selected or moved forward for funding have not been eligible in other funding programs. So in some ways that's a plus because we're able to move projects that are not having as success elsewhere. But it also creates complications because there are reasons that there are readiness concerns with those other funding programs, which leads to more uncertainty, can lead to those cost increases. And part of that is because we don't really look at the level of development before we select a project. And I know we've been having this conversation on the CVTA side as well, but we don't require any design work done up front. We're selecting projects at very early planning stages. And so what is the right level? What's the right mix for readiness? That's one of the considerations. And then sort of on the flip side, how much should we be looking at the sponsor's past history of project delivery in assessing the projects? Historically, we did look at that, and the program was pretty controlled in a lot of ways through looking at that sponsor delivery. How many projects did you have in our pipeline that were still outstanding before anything new would be selected? That's something we've moved a little bit away from, but trying to figure out where's the right balance in that. How many projects you still have outstanding, how many have been delivered recently, what's ready to move forward. And this one did show up as a pretty important priority for our locality. So 66% of the surveys said that this area was a priority for us to focus on. And then the final one that we'd heard was timing and coordination. And I think a lot of this we've already started moving to address, but I did want to continue on here because as you see, this one was also 2/3 of the survey results said that this was a priority. So really there's a couple parts here. The timing and coordination is really lining this program up with CVTA, with TAP, with Smart Scale. And so I think we've addressed that through the shift to every other year applications. Basically, we're now on a regional applications 1 year, Smart Scale on the other year. So that's a nice balance. It allows us to plan ahead for leveraging. It allows us to get a good sense of which projects are going to have money before we go into the competitive process through the state. But the other part of this was that there was a desire from some of our members for more sponsor contact, so more interest in discussing the projects, the project scoring, the allocations. So just a little bit more time for this to be to build consensus rather than having 1 or 2 meetings where we have to make decisions on these. And so that's something that we can address through this process as well, trying to figure out what's the best way for us to make sure that you have enough say in how the projects are being reviewed while still allowing us to comply with the structure that we have. So those were the 6 main concerns that we'd heard. What I wanted to do was just spend the rest of the time that we had for the meeting was just listening and hearing, are there any other things that we missed that we need to be thinking about as we go through this review process? And then once we've gone through that, I can wrap up with a sort of preliminary schedule of how we're thinking about going through this with the TAC. So with that, I'm just here to listen from and get other ideas and hear what you guys have to say. Madam Chair, it looks like there's a couple hands up.
Yeah, Sharon, I'm sorry.
So
Sharon?
Sharon, yeah, and Barb, you may have been first. Do you want to go ahead? Okay. All right. Just 2 things. So I think it's important for our existing projects to be funded. I know we have to allow some room for new projects, but I just wanted to reiterate, I think it's important to, that our existing projects, when they're ready for construction, that we can complete some of these legacies and get them done. But I also think it's important that we continue to allow for leveraging for some of these CMAQ funds and I think it's great that we're working the timing with Smart Scale, and that's an important part too. So those are just, I think we're doing that. I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you. Barb?
Thank you, Sharon. Barb, did you want to give some comments?
Yeah, I agree that we do need to keep our existing projects rolling, and sending the right message, like Dirona was saying before, I think is going to be important when we're talking to the policy committee. One of the things I noted as we were going through it is when we were talking about regional projects, I think just by nature of the size of the pot and the emphasis on benefit cost ratio, the projects that we submit reflect those two items, so it's just like Smart Scale. We kind of realize that cost outweighs the benefits always, so if it's a cheaper project, it's going to have a better chance. So if we want to move the needle on trying to fund more regional projects, we need to figure out a way to temper benefit cost a little bit in the scoring process. I think going to biennial application submittal is going to help as well, make the pot a little bit bigger, and that might be something to consider as well. It's, as a first step, evaluating existing project needs annually or every other year, whichever, and taking a look at the availability of funds. And if it is so small, maybe we don't accept new projects for that round and we wait 2 more years so that we can get a good amount of money available for projects. That's all I had.
Thank you, Barb. Let's see if there's anyone else with comments. Any other comments? Suggestions?
Madam Vice Chair,
Yes.
Dirona, just to Miles, good job on this. And what are the next steps? I know you were speaking about the time frame, but also is it like, just what's the next steps for TAC in this process?
Sure. Let me pull up this slide again. So the next steps, what we were proposing is to follow a pretty tight timeline to try and get through some of these. So basically what we wanted to do was going through the project issues that we'd heard in the order that they were sort of ranked as priorities for each of our members, and try and knock out 2 of these for each of the upcoming meetings. So focusing on the existing projects and project readiness in December, timing and coordination, and the regional priorities discussion in January, and then bike ped and the time commitment in February. And basically just have similar length, half-hour conversation at the TAC to go through this. Staff can start working on refining those proposals down so we can bring something back to you for a consolidated review. So just continuing with the discussion here at the TAC level, that was our proposal right now. The end goal in what we're trying to get to is that before we start the next funding cycle, which would be in like July or August of next year, that we have any updates that we want to make to the framework completed. So that's what we're trying to get to. So working backwards, we'd need the policy board to act in May or June, and then we would need TAC to have some sort of a recommendation before then. So that's what we're proposing. If there are any concerns, I'm happy to hear them, but this is what we wanted. We just want to have a chance to discuss all as a group to work through these issues. Very similar to what we've been going through on the CVTA side, since that is finally starting to wrap up a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Chair, if I would, Diana. So it looks like we have 3 months with this schedule to still kind of come back and look at it. I'm not sure whether or not I see what you're saying in regard to like CVTA broke up the pieces, but I think we have an overall document that that we started with to be able to break up the pieces to see how they interact. So maybe one of the first steps is that you um I don't know if it's almost like what you would do for each of the categories, and maybe we use those meetings to kind of work through it. I know, Barb and Chester kind of take a stab at it, and then that's how we can kind of formulate it, because I don't know if the incremental look at these two without really looking at the other impacts is going to be that beneficial potentially. I don't know, but definitely others comments, but I do see that we could figure out some approach to do over the time frame that you've given, and then that still allows for 3 months. You have this ending in February, that'll allow for 3 months to kind of get it passed, but I don't want those to be like critical months that then mess it all up. If we can kind of work really hard during these next 3 meetings, kind of, and maybe a recommendation that you're thinking about as staff.
Yes, thank you. And just to as a little bit of follow up on that, we have possible solutions, and this is kind of what we were planning to go through, but this is essentially the options that we looked at in the survey, how highly ranked each of them was, and then we can use that as a starting point, and as well as sort of staff's position on what we think would be the most effective solutions. So we do have that prepared. We were planning to guide these conversations a little bit more in that way. But yes, absolutely, we're open to ideas on if there's a better way to structure this for the next few months to make it as effective as possible.
Thank you, Joanna and Miles. That's good information that you presented. Any other comments? All right, I see no other comments, so we'll go ahead and move to item 9, the transportation agenda updates from DRPT.
I'm sorry, we don't have a DRPT representative on the
Not here.
meeting today, so I believe we could move on to the next agency update.
Very good. Thank you, Janice. So if we could get an update from GRTC, Ms. Robinson.
Yes, I just wanted to highlight that GRTC's October 20th service change came with improving frequencies on the 1A and on our 7A and 7B high frequency weekday service. There's now a bus leaving every 15 minutes from downtown Richmond to Churchill and to Richmond International Airport. We also did a 7.8-mile extension of our Route 1 to serve Virginia Center Commons. And now there's an extension of our Exalia link zone, our microtransit zone, to better connect the two services. So you can now switch seamlessly from one node to the other at that area. The service is funded by a DRPT Merit demo grant that included 36 new stops, and will also receive infrastructure improvements in early 2025. The increased frequency on the 1A comes after our January extension to Walmart Way, and has resulted in more than 10,000 monthly riders on just the Chesterfield portion alone. So that's been really great to see. And I think that is it for my agency updates. Our next board meeting is November 19th on Tuesday at GRTC admin office. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. That's exciting. You got all those 10,000 riders. That's exciting. All right, and do we have Mr. O'Keefe here from Ride Finders?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Thank you, John. If you want to give us an update.
Yes, ma'am. Ride Finders completed the upload of the GRTC and Ride Finders program information for the ACT, which is the Association for Commuters Transportation, TDM accreditation pilot program. I know I've spoken about it before. It's been a several-month process, but we should find out in January if Ride Finders and GRT is selected to, be part of this TDM accreditation. We also met with employers or training specialists for Hanover County and provided them with information about Ride Finder services to also include the new microtransit link expansion of the 1A and the Ashland link. We attended events for the Walk to School Day at the Cool Springs Elementary in Hanover County and Bike and Roll to School Day at Westover Hills Elementary in Richmond, and as well as attended the Route 1 Link Ashland Microtransit Expansion ribbon cutting event. We also attended the Chamber RVA's Mission Tomorrow event, where students visited the bus on site and learned more about careers in transit and transportation. We hosted the GRTC Rider Advisory Council quarterly meeting at Ride Finders Conference Room here on site. We participated in an interview with the U.S. Government Accountability Office discussing how increases in telework have affected transportation, and that was in response to a congressional request. And Ride Finders, last and not least, but Ride Finders submitted the CAPS plan for the board approval, and the governing board approved the CAPS with the signed resolution with the board of directors approving, Ride Finders, strategic plan and moving forward with that. So with that, that's all I have, and be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, John. That's exciting, getting the youth involved. Thank you for the congressional work as well. Any comments or? From the members? Okay. All right, so if we can get an update from Ms. Rhodes from VDOT, please.
Morning, everybody. I'll try and make this quick. At the last CTB meeting, there was a presentation on smart scale. There were a number of presentations that affected.
Sarah, we're having trouble hearing you.
How about now? Better? Okay, thank you. At the last CTB meeting in October, there was a smart scale presentation held, and then there were a number of presentations for sort of small scale items that affected the district. All of these are itemized in the agency report, which will be sent out later today. The next CTB meeting will be December 3rd and 4th. This round of smart scale, we are almost done with estimate reviews on smart scale in Richmond District. There are only a few other districts that are still reviewing estimates. So we have closed out this round much more quickly than we have previous rounds, which is very exciting. In Richmond District, we are only down to 12 applications that need additional review. So that's very, very exciting. And then our district engineer for key projects and status has asked us to expand our projects that we discuss each meeting. So typically I bring you an update about the Fall Line Trail and the I-64 gap. And so for the Fall Line Trail this month, the report that he gave at the meeting, the policy board meeting a few weeks ago, maybe last week, focused on that a portion of the Fall Line Trail in Henrico County is under construction, and that there is a kind urging that residents not walk on this trail while it is currently under construction. Regarding the I-64 gap, segment B, the change there is we're anticipated to be awarded in January of 2025. So that's the update I have there. We will also be adding Mayo Bridge, Short Pump Area Transportation Improvement Project, NEPA, and the Powhite Parkway EIS to our monthly reports. For the Mayo Bridge, a citizen information meeting was held in the Plan RVA offices on September 17th. It was very well attended. The draft results of a traffic study are currently underway, and we are expecting those to be delivered mid-December. Regarding the Short Pump Area NEPA, a public hearing was held in the Short Pump area on October 29th at the Wyndham Hotel in Short Pump. And a we are anticipating NEPA to close out by the end of the year. Regarding the Powhite Parkway EIS, a public outreach effort was held on a citizen information meeting was held on November 7th along Hull Street. There's an upcoming community office hours this week, November 14th from 1:30 to 4:30 at the Clover Hill Library, and right of entry letters were sent out for properties impacted by the study. And that is the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. So moving on to item 10, just information item, the plan to RVA newsletter, the Better Together connector. I guess everybody has access to that. If Dorona has any update on that, or I'm quite sure how that works. So
No, just the information item. Everybody check it out.
yep. Get updates for this month. And moving on to item 11, did we have any TAC member comments? See if anyone's got their hands raised. Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and just make a note that our next meeting will be December 10th at 9 a.m. And if we have no other comments, everybody okay with adjourning?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Everybody have a great day.
Good job.